Welcome back from break here on the Heart of Sports. Jeff, we talk a lot about the mental side of sports, and who better to bring on than sports psychology coach David Essel, who has a new book out, Mental Mastery and Maximum Performance for Professional Athletes. David, congratulations on the latest book. Thanks for the time today.
Yeah, Jason, Jeff, so excited to be with you guys. It's something that has been a part of my life since I was six. As you read the book, I tell part of my story that at 6 years of age, I started sleeping with a basketball in my bed like a lot of kids do, and then from then until today, it's just been a huge part of my existence, helping athletes with their mental skills as well as mental health. Of course, helping them overcome challenges, weaknesses, and also something, guys, that a lot of people don't talk about that in the world of sports psychology is crucial. These athletes, a lot of them are on the road 60 to 70% of the year. I mean, relationship challenges with children, that's another big part of what we do. So we cover everything from addictions, and addictions are huge in the world of professional athletes. We wouldn't think about it until you start thinking about food addictions, gambling addictions, pot, alcohol, etc. But one of the reasons that I wrote the book at this very time, guys, is because the American College of Sports Medicine came out with this incredibly powerful survey. And it said that 35% of elite athletes right now are struggling deeply with mental health, anxiety, depression, ADD, ADHD, even eating disorders. Like, it's off the chart, right? But in our private practice of 43 years of working with athletes, that's extremely underreported. The real reality is about 60% of elite athletes right now are struggling deeply with some type of separation anxiety from partners or family. Maybe there's extreme stress of not knowing if they're going to make the team, if they're going to play, if they're going, I look at some of these athletes, and I've got to take my hat off to Russell Westbrook, one of the most amazing guards that's ever played in the NBA. When he was asked to take a second seat with the Lakers last year, you did not see a drop in his energy, passion, enthusiasm. That guy came off the bench like a freaking tornado, for gosh sake, So we have stories of people like this to lift current athletes. Of course, we want every athlete, and 60% are struggling right now. So we want them to have role models of people that have learned what we term as really powerful emotional regulation skills, which is taking a back seat if that helps the team be a better team. Taking the word I out, of course, as we always say. And then we want people to know that this world that we're in right now, it's not just the American College of Sports Medicine. The NBA came out 2 years ago with NBA Mind Health. 3 years ago, the Indianapolis Colts came out with Kick the Stigma about mental health. So we've got a ton of organizations and individual teams now coming to the forefront saying professional athletes suffer and struggle more than you can ever imagine. And, for me and my work, it's a blessing. It's a blessing that we have Kevin Loves of the world, Max Crosby, NFL, and for the Raiders, just came out 3 years sober, talking about the importance of rehabilitation centers. So in the book, we cover everything so that athletes can see, hey, there's hope. If I'm struggling with this, we have Max Crosby, who overcame his addiction. If I'm struggling with this, so the book is really about a motivational place for athletes to go. But, I just got done with an interview, guys, a couple minutes ago with an individual who just talks to the general public. And he loved the book because it's stories of athletes overcoming challenges just like you and I. So we might get inspired as an everyday person to read, like, you're kidding me. Novak Djokovic went through that in order to become the greatest male tennis player ever. A lot of people don't know what he went through to get there. And maybe some of these stories that we tell people at home who aren't even athletically in nature will take on and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to try that. If it worked for him, maybe it'll work for me.
I don't know if you had a chance to watch the new Netflix series on tennis players, but the series is, I think, a 10-part series, and it talks a lot about the mental side of tennis and how hard it is, especially for individual sport athletes, to deal with the mental side of tennis. What is the challenge that the tennis players, people that are not in team sports, have that maybe team sports athletes do have?
It's a great question, Jeff. Finally in tennis, they're allowing coaches to actually interact legally with their players on the court. So that's a good move. A couple years ago, players and coaches couldn't interact hardly at all unless you had some kind of secret sign language, for God's sake. So they're allowing people now, the coaches, to interact. It's a great question, individual sports versus team sports. We have a college athlete going pro, a college tennis player going pro. His father was his coach the whole time. And then when he got to this level, his father knew he needed to go up a higher level. And as we're working together, one of the things that this young tennis player, I say he's young, he's 21, never mastered was what happens after a double fault. If you don't have the emotional capability to regulate yourself after a double fault, it's going to throw you off. So what happened with him, and you'll see this at the lower levels for sure before they get to the pros, and some pros too, is that he had no emotional regulation. So you double fault, he'd swing the racket in the air, he'd curse some words. Of course, he goes to the next service box and his brain isn't even there. So we have techniques like cognitive behavioral therapy that we teach our athletes how to allow a missed shot, a double fault, whatever sport that they're in. We give them psychological tools to snap them out of what just happened to get back into the present moment. And it's part of the work of a sports psychology coach, is to have these tools available because, Jeff, everyone goes through something like that, in an individual sport. They don't have four other teammates running down the court with them saying, don't worry about that last shot. We got you. It's a very different mindset. And so these individual sport players, tennis, golf, etc., super need to understand the power of psychological tools that we teach in order to help them stay focused and in the moment.
So on the team side of sports, we often talk, when we're talking baseball, we talk about roles in the bullpen and how important it is to have a defined role so you know what your responsibility is so that you can prepare. Can you talk about how important routines and roles are for athletes so that they can be at their best when they need it?
Well, you ask a great question, Jason. And one of the things we teach all of our athletes is daily ritualistic steps to take, starting first thing in the morning. Like our athletes do not open up any electric device for at least 20 minutes. Now, this might not seem like much, but, the average person, the first thing they do when they wake up, they roll over, grab their iPhone, Android, whatever it might be. There we go.
As I raise my hand with my phone.
Thank you, Jason, for your honesty and your vulnerability. I appreciate that. That's right. That's right. And while David's talking, we're looking at our phones, but it's become an addiction, right? And so what happens is especially with athletes, high level entrepreneurs, radio, television, sports hosts like yourselves, the way that we can get a better jump on our life is to control the amount of time we spend that are unproductive in nature. Now, we can justify anything. We can say, well, I have to know what happened last night in sports, so I have to look at it first thing in the morning, right? Well, that is not true. We can wait 20 minutes and that score is still going to be there and that story is still going to be there. But how you start your day is one of the most crucial things in the world. How you start your day from a fueling point of view, fluids, food, intake, all of that, how you start your day from a mental point of view. In the book, we talk about so many different people, LeBron James, of course, Novak Djokovic, how they love meditation. But I'll tell you the story that blew my mind in an interview with Deontay Wilder, the great heavyweight boxer. I had never imagined, guys, and by the way, my book, the Audible Mental Mastery and Maximum Performance for Professional Athletes, is free at our website, so you can get the whole freaking book, me reading it, which is much better than an AI reader. I'll tell you that right now. So, I have a lot of excitement, but Deontay Wilder, oh my gosh, all the guy wants to talk about is mental health techniques. He spends so much of his day in prayer, meditation, doing all these things that we teach regular people to do to decrease stress. This guy is magnificent. He said that his meditation has become so powerful that when he gets into the ring, if there's 20, 40, 60,000 fans, he does not hear one. He said his focus is so amazing. Everyone can take advantage of Deontay Wilder's statement. It doesn't matter if you work at a convenience store, you sweep streets, or you're a multi-billionaire. When you start to utilize these techniques, now remember, these are some of the highest paid individuals in the world, and they're relying on Pilates, meditation, yoga, clean eating. LeBron James' trainer says that LeBron James does cheat in his meals. and his cheat meal is a chocolate chip cookie every 2 weeks. So we can learn from these guys.
Right, but you talked about Deontay Wilder and how he doesn't hear any of the fans. That's not realistic for a lot of athletes and a lot of people in general. They do internalize a lot of this information, and you know, for us, we've been watching. I don't know if you know him, the shortstop Trey Turner, and the story of Trey Turner is that he came to the Phillies this year, signed a $300 million contract, struggled when he started, heard some boos. Even said, "Hey, look, I deserve to be booed. My mother deserved to be booed." And he made a joke out of it, but it clearly impacted him. And then the Phillies fans decided to cheer him, and his season has exploded in a positive direction since that one moment. What do you do for athletes who can't? You're not going to have all of the fans do what happened in Philadelphia this one time. Right. How do you help athletes who internalize the pressure, who internalize the negative comments and thoughts that they hear or read?
Jeff, it's an interesting question. Let me flip it on the other side and tell you the benefit of fans booing. I have major league pitchers that I work with right now that use the adrenaline of the opposing fans to be at their best. They pitch much better on the road than at home, right? So it's a mental mindset. And again, this is the role that someone like myself, a sports psychology coach, utilizes. We would teach him how to handle that. You know, the expectation is through the roof, right? You get this massive contract and fans, ownership, everyone, reporters, et cetera, expect you to be the best. If you are having an off game, month, season, you need to have the psychological tools available to help you to deal with that. And they're available. You know, they're available for everyone. You know, I love the mindset of Reggie Miller, former Indiana Pacers star guard, where he says if he ever missed 10 shots in a row, he told himself in his mind he made 10 shots in a row. And he'd just keep going on and shooting. And I think that's a great example of mental discipline. He never allowed missed shots to get in the way of him being a great shooter. But he said there are other shooters that he's worked with that could have been better than him, but allowed the mental aspect of the game. When they missed 3 in a row, they would shut down and they wouldn't shoot for the rest of the quarter. While Reggie is sitting there going, "No, I'm just going to pump up 10 more. But see, that's a mental approach, and that's mental health. Someone who has these kind of tools, guys, can face about any kind of challenge and not let it affect them at a level that it might you or I. And I go to Jimmy Butler last year from the NBA playoffs. He was obviously severely injured with an ankle injury. But, you know, every time he was asked about his ankle, and if you guys remember the playoffs, there was times he was standing in the corner just as a decoy. He wasn't even moving.
Unfortunately, we remember the playoffs and the fact that Jimmy Butler left Philadelphia.
I hear you.
We're not still sore about that or anything.
Yeah. Not that it still bothers us,
nope.
Right? Well,
right.
I'll tell you a Moses Malone story that will make you smile.
There you
Much
go.
better.
There you go. As a matter of fact, let's go right and make you guys feel awesome.
Yes.
So there's 2 stories I'm going to tell you about Moses Malone. One is a personal one when I met him, and then one is one that Charles Barkley is just incredible during an interview, what he said about Moses Malone. But so, you know, Moses Malone, I was 15, he was 17. We both were at Dave Bing's All-Star Camp in the Pocono Pines, Pennsylvania. And I remember being at the camp, and there was about 300 kids there. And we had heard a message. There was this special kid being flown in from Virginia. And all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, this limousine pulls up. And out of the back stands this 6'9", 16, 17-year-old kid with a torn, dirty white T-shirt, shorts that were held together by a safety pin. I mean, I can remember this. I was 14 or 15. I can remember it like it was yesterday. Enough laces just to hold the shoes onto his feet, but the soles were completely worn out. I mean, he was basically walking on bare ground. So we see this guy, and all of us kids are like in awe. Who is this? And he's coming in a limousine, and how do we don't know who he is? And about 7:00 that night, Dave Bing opens up the loudspeakers at the camp and says, in 5 minutes, I challenge Moses Malone to a one-on-one match, court 1. Click. Microphone goes off. We couldn't believe it, right? We're sitting there going, he's about our age. And Dave Bing's an all-pro, and Dave Bing is this. And I went to Syracuse. Of course, Dave went to Syracuse. That's how I found out about the camp. And Moses Malone held his own for like the first, they were playing to 21 for the first 10 to 12 points. I mean, we couldn't freaking believe it, right? And then Dave Bing just became the monster that he was. And even though he wasn't as tall as some of the other players in the league, Dave Bing was a massively powerful player. So the very first chance I get to see Moses, he's up against an NBA All-Star, and it blows my mind. And as we got to know him over the week, we realized that he never spoke one time unless spoken to. His talent was so huge, but he would barely ever speak. And he would always just smile and nod or something. He didn't really speak much. Well, later on, I find out that he had struggles speaking. You know, he had an impediment. And so they nicknamed him Mumbles because of the fact that he couldn't speak as clearly as people expected. But, you know, that was something. I followed him, you know, when he died in 2015 in his sleep. It crushed me. I mean, how many NBA forward centers, you know, do 50 points and 30 rebounds in a game, for gosh sake, right? Winning 2 MVPs. Come on now. Let's rally around this guy. This guy is freaking amazing. So he was an inspiration to me my whole life. You know, I played 2 years at college at Syracuse. I wasn't good enough. I could have played 2 more, but I decided to opt out of the last 2 years. I wasn't good enough to go pro, but I never
You should have entered the transfer portal.
I should have. I wish it was available back then. Hey, Jeff, the other thing I got screwed over by playing 43 years ago, there was no 3-point shot.
Oh, you definitely had a better shot then. I did want to ask you, we got about 4 minutes left before we have to go. How important is it for not only other athletes, but for society to see these athletes redefining toughness? It used to be fight through it, be tough. Now, being vulnerable and honest about how you're feeling is another way to show toughness for these athletes. Can you talk about that and the impact it has on others?
Jason, somebody like Kevin Love.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal question. I mean, you know, in the NBA Mind Health commercials that the NBA ran last year, I mean, Kevin Love said it 100 times. DeMar Rosen said many things, you know, but Kevin said, the greatest call that I've ever made in my life was the one reaching out for help for my mental health challenges. You know, when you see someone like Kevin Love, who's highly respected in this league, you know, extremely respected man, when you see him coming out with statements like that, when you see the Indianapolis Colts coming out with massive new ads, kick the stigma, I mean, we know there's problems. Listen, the NBA, NFL, MLB, you know, Major League Baseball has one of the most incredible stories with Andrew Tolles. You know, they released him as a pitcher. Most people know this story. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and they re-signed him so that he could get the mental health help he needed, or he would have been homeless and probably dead in a very short period of time. So mental health is huge. And if I have a moment to tell the Charles Barkley, do we have a second for that?
Yeah, we do.
Moses Malone?
Always for Charles.
Okay. For anything for Charles and Moses, right? So this is such a cool story. And this is a story the public needs to hear and to apply to your own life. And I tell a story in my book that almost matches Charles' story, but mine was with a coach and his was with Moses. So he comes onto the team. First time he meets Moses Malone, he comes up, he says, oh my gosh, you know, I respect your career and I want to be more like you. And Moses Malone, Charles said, Moses Malone looks at him and he goes, you know, you're fat, you're lazy, and you're slow. Lose 20 pounds. And so he walks away, right? And Charles is going, this is my introduction to Moses Malone. So Charles was offended at first. And then he said, well, what the heck? You know, I'll do what he says. So he loses 20 pounds. Now he's down from 290 to 270. And he comes up to Moses and says, hey, Moses, all right, listen, dude, I did it. I dropped 20 pounds. I'm down to 270. Moses looks at him and goes, you're still fat. You're still slow. You're still lazy. You're never going to make it as an all-star. And he walks away.
Wow.
And Charles goes, what is going on here? I'm doing everything this guy says. He doesn't give me any credit. He says, screw it. I'm losing another 20. He loses another 20 pounds. He's down to 250. He comes and goes, Moses, finally, I'm at 250. He says, Moses looks at me and he goes, you're too late.
You can never make everybody
260
happy.
is the right height.
260 is the weight you should play at to be an all-star. And Charles followed his advice. And of course, the rest is history, as they say, right? But I just think it's such a great story. It's a great example of both humility on Charles's part and the role of a mentor in Moses. And, you know, I think we need to look at that. Sometimes we have bosses that we think are idiots that really are smart and they have our best interests in heart. They may not have great communication skills and be able to tell us things in a fluffy way, but we need to look at that. And it brought me back in the book. I tell the story of my freshman coach in high school who I hated for 2 years, Larry Miller. I couldn't stand the guy. He had me, working on my defense 90% of practices. He had me practice taking offensive fouls constantly. I couldn't stand him. I wanted to be a shooting guard. Come on, give me the ball. I'm a shooting guard, right? So I was with him for 2 years and I left. And guys, when I finally got up to the level at Syracuse University, all the coaches kept asking me, who taught you how to slide and take those charges? Who taught you how to be an animal on defense? Who taught you how to pass like that? And everything was Larry Miller, the guy I couldn't stand. So take that as a lesson. Sometimes the mentors, teachers we have are tough with us, and sometimes they're right.
The book is Mental Mastery and Maximum Performance for Professional Athletes. Thank you, David Essel, sports psychology coach. Look forward to talking to you again.
Jason, Jeff, it was awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.